Now today I'm going to approach watercolour painting from a slightly different way. I'm going to use a watercolour I painted on plein air outside 2 or 3 weeks ago to paint another one, but with a slightly different composition, and perhaps to concentrate on getting something slightly different out of the experience. I know many artists differentiate their plein air work from their studio work. I'm never quite sure the purpose of that. It may be important to them, but it isn't important to the viewer. What's most important is how the picture conveys the atmosphere and sense of the place. And I think painting in the studio is a good example of what Wordsworth used to call emotion recollected in tranquility. The experience of painting on plein air and the experience of painting in the studio are quite different. But ultimately the purpose behind the painting should be the same. And it's really, frankly, a matter of temperament and personality as to which method you prefer. I think it's almost necessary to use some plein air notes, sketches, finished paintings, whatever you like to call them, to inform the work that you do in the studio. Now this is the painting, the watercolour I painted at Pin Mill about 3 weeks ago. It was quite busy and the day started with pouring rain. I painted the sky first, which isn't my usual way of tackling things, but then the sun came out and the atmosphere completely changed. So what I want to do is not paint one exactly like this, but use some of the elements to convey a feeling of the place. To paraphrase Maya Angelou, it's not what I've painted and it's not really what I'm going to say. It's how the painting makes people feel. Coming back from a day at Pin Mill, you don't comment on the nice boats or the nice sky. You normally would say something like, oh, it was a nice breezy bright day. And I think that's important to convey that. The painter's job really is to convey that visually by the marks we make. So I want to try and keep it as lively and as fresh as possible, albeit that I'm doing it in the studio. And now I'm away from the subject. I am not bullied by the facts, and I can change the colour of the boats and change various other things to help convey and give the feeling of that experience of the day. Now I've already sketched it out, and as you can probably see, what I've done is sort of honed in a little bit closer to the boats. This is a piece of marsh, £140 rough paper, which is the same as the paper the original plein air watercolour was painted on. Now I'll just make up a light grey, cobalt blue and light red with a little bit of raw sienna. Notice I'll take water to the paint, not paint to water. Now I want to try and preserve some of these masts because they were all light aluminium masts against the sky. Well, I say all light aluminium. The one on the left, sorry, the right, was a wooden one. Let's have a little bit of more light red and raw sienna. Lots of water to give me a slightly lighter wash there. Do both, when you've got a subject like this, make sure that you do both sides at the same time. By that I mean both bits of sky, both sides of the mast. So that you, if there is a variation in the colour of the sky, it doesn't change when it goes behind a mast. It changes out in the front. go right over the trees. Now we've done that bit, done the tricky bit, we can be a little bit more free and easy here. So nice light colour there, cobalt, a little bit more light red. It's too much. Tiny bit of raw sienna. If you overdo the raw sienna, it will combine with the cobalt to give you a green tinge. So don't overdo the raw sienna, but it just adds a little bit of softness, I always feel, to the grey. Little hint of blue sky here. Be conscious of the other elements in the picture, so that the shapes of the sky, this is light red and raw sienna, the shapes of the clouds in the sky don't echo the shape of any buildings or trees. A little bit of, let's put a bit of burnt umber with the grey, just to warm it up a bit. And then the clouds get a little bit smaller as we come down towards the horizon, just to help give a sense of space and distance. And then just a tiny bit of ultramarine with that grey now. Get a little bit of perspective on the clouds, or in the sky anyway, and then a nice sweeping horizontal stroke near the horizon over the far distant woods and hills, but I want to preserve those little white sails. I'll just take up some of those drips with the brush I've just wiped over my old towel, just to get some of the moisture off. And then some nice light wash, just to indicate that little bit of river that we can see glinting in here. Horizontal strokes, because the water lays flat. And the best indicator that it's water, frankly, will be making sure that that far distant shoreline is absolutely horizontal. Let's just soften that. Okay, let's keep going. Don't keep stopping and admiring it. I don't necessarily start by painting in the traditional way from light to dark, but I think it's too difficult to imagine it all. But I do try and paint, or not try, but I do occasionally sort of paint from light to dark in the traditional way, in sort of small areas and where it seems a natural thing to do. This is such as this path here, which is sort of sandy and gravel. There's a few figures here. Little bit of cadmium yellow, perhaps even a bit of cadmium orange, just to line it up a little bit here. Now this path is horizontal. Notice whatever area I'm painting, whether it's the sky, the water, or in this case this sort of gravelly path here, there's a pile of bricks here. I'll just indicate it was a nice accent of warm colour, which I'll add to that. Note, what I was going to say is, when I'm painting, I tend, whatever the area is, I paint from light to from top to bottom, and then this gravelly path turned into an asphalt roadway just here. So take any advantage of changes. A little bit of colour there, and here. Bit of perspective here. They all go up to the vanishing point, which is on the eye line, horizon line. There's the eye line through the eyes. There's the horizon, and these go up to the vanishing point there. Now just clean the palette up. Now I'm going to change the light on this a little bit. So we're going to dip and dab about quite a bit in different places. There was a bluish, or not bluish, a blue canopy on here. A little bit darker. So if we have the light coming from the left, a little bit darker there. Then ultramarine and light red. Going with a little bit of raw sienna. And the side of this this boat, the cabin top, is blue. Is in the shade, so it's sort of, it's a white boat, but that's all in the shade, and nicely. Let's just put a tiny bit of raw sienna in there, just to get some of the reflected light off the gravelly path. A bit more blue down here. That's an important shape there. And put a little bit of grey in there, a bit more abstracty, mainly as a negative shape to emphasize the edge of the boat here, and there's and the other boat was, I'm going to make that white as well, but I mixed up a different grey. I put a little bit of cerulean blue with this. Don't use the same grey all over the place, and if you deliberately use a different colour, a different blue perhaps, to get your grey, then you can hope that it'll be different. Just going to add a little bit of raw umber to the stem there of the boat. I'll take up these drips. Then some light red and raw sienna to give the wooden cabin here. Save a little bit of white paper just on the rim so it doesn't all flood in. And just while we're waiting for all that to dry, we can just add this little bit of this yellow lifebuoy thing that hangs on that mast. It's just a little bit of extra colour. And then while that's drying, let's put in the far distance shore. Ultramarine and cadmium red. Now I want to make it slightly deeper and more colour as I come to the right, so I can either start on the right and gradually water it down and change the colour, or I can start here and add more colour. I think adding more colour is marginally easier. So let's start here. I've got to pull out two things. I've got to sort of think about. I've got to pull out those little boats in the distance, but I also got to gradually introduce a little bit of colour. So I've introduced a little bit of raw sienna there. And then a bit more raw sienna, perhaps even a little bit of, it's too much, I'd add a little bit of viridian, and we can add a little bit of detail to the top of the hill as there'll be a tiny bit more detail there. I've added a little bit of raw umber. I'm still holding the brush at the end, even though this is quite fine work. It'll just give a slight sort of more freedom of movement, and it's bound to wobble a little bit, but my wobble is my painting handwriting, if you like, in the same way that you can have your own. Just rough up the top of that a bit, and then that will go in, and while that's drying we can add just one or two little sort of suggestions of hulls of some of these boats. As long as there's enough of a and then while we've got that, let's put in the marsh on this side. I'm using a colour new to me that's a little bit of sap green, which I'm just trying out, and the marsh runs out here. Bit of raw umber added to that. As I say, the suggestion that you should mix up a big wash and get a big brush and make a big statement, I think, isn't always the most helpful thing, particularly for beginners. I think you should keep changing things, as indeed they change in nature. If you just have one solid mass of a flat colour, it will just look flat. Let's add a little bit of viridian and raw sienna now to make this green just a little bit more greeny. And then we've just got some nondescript mud and a little bit of cobalt and ultramarine and cobalt violet here, just to make a nice attractive colour, which we'll add to later on. Just fill up that. There's a little bit of white there. You don't want too much in the way of flecks of white amongst those sails, because they'll conflict with the sails. You want the white paper for the sails, not white flecks of holes in a hillside. Apart from anything else, that the hillside won't look. It won't look. It's got some white flecks there, which I don't want. White holes in a hillside doesn't exactly convey a nice solid terrestrial sort of feel to the landscape. We can add a little bit of texture to some of these bricks here, with a bit of burnt sienna. Quite thick paint. Doesn't matter what it is. Just just enough so that people can use their knowledge and experience to recognise what it is, without giving them lots of unnecessary detail. Some thicker paint straight out of the tube. Here we are, Viridian green and some burnt sienna. It's really quite thick, and we can then just put a little bit of dark in here. And because I didn't put any water with that, because that paint is still wet, I'm using the moisture already on the paper to dilute and deliver the paint to the paper so it flows on. Right, well, we'll just stop there. There may be a few adverts just for a few moments while I clean the palette, and then we'll finish this off here. Right, we'll do a little bit more work to these two boats here. Ultramarine, and this is actually a little bit of black. I've been experimenting with black. A couple of little sort of porthole things here, that and another one here and one here. Notice how just getting them on a slight angle helps convey the slope of the cabin. There's some burnt sienna, just enough water to make it flow, and there's a sort of wooden there, and a tiny bit more. And then a real deep blue for the anti-fouling. So there's ultramarine and Windsor blue. And then there's the keel appears down here, a little bit more Windsor blue. And even deeper, let's put a bit of burnt umber with it, and perhaps even a bit of black to make it really dark under here. And to get that to join on, some Viridian and raw umber. I need this, get that all lost in the grass here. So join it on, and at the same time we could do the border of the Boatyard. Just always look to see where you can join things on. And don't worry about trying to keep everything absolutely ramrod straight. Make it look as if it's been as if it's handmade. A bit of cerulean blue just on the edge of this keel here and here. Sometimes it's better to use, I feel, a lighter colour than just keep adding water to continually adding water and getting sort of weaker and weaker colour. There's a post here, just a nondescript coloured post to support the, that's a little bit too bluey. Put a bit of brown with it. And while we're at it, we can paint this little dinghy here. There's a rather awkward post in the way, but I feel those sort of things, as there's one there, they're worth putting in because they give a sense of layering. And again, with stiff paint, raw umber, and we can just indicate the rope on the edge of this this boat, this little dinghy here. And quite dark down here. And we'll join it to a shadow in the grass. So always try and paint shapes rather than things, even when they're sort of joined together. And this boat unusually was sort of yellow and green inside. Unusual, I do remember that. A bit of green there, and then a little bit of yellow in here. Never miss up the opportunity to introduce a little bit of primary colour. And then a bit of cadmium red and light red. I'm going to have the anti-fouling on this boat a nice red. Again, paint around that post. Now as we come down here, there'll be less light, so let's put a little bit of alizarin crimson with it. Alizarin crimson's a nice red to darken. And then this side is going to be darker. And even darker there, so let's put a bit of burnt umber and burnt sienna with it. Rather than just I don't want to put a blue with it because it takes off the redness. I want to keep it red, and it comes right down here. We may be able to just lift a little bit of that there, just to get it a little bit lighter, to emphasize the light on that side. Actually, it will be dark just underneath here. And of course that'll cast a really nice sort of shadow. Let's put a bit of ultramarine and burnt sienna. Bit of light red now. Just to link that to the ground. Just a little bit of shadowy marks on here, and also just an indication of a couple of portholes perhaps. And finally some burnt umber just to get the gunnel of the boat there. Bit of burnt umber. Still wet here, so I can go back without worrying too much. Now we'll do some of these smaller forms before we do all the background trees. This is very much a case of not doing anything, but just little, not painting things, but just little spots of colour of different shapes. We've got some clearly defined boats, so we don't need to labour the point about the other boats. The viewer will do the rest. Now don't forget, you know, a painting like this is made up of, well, as all paintings are, they're made up of several different ingredients. Obviously there's the paint and the paper. There's the subject, and there's also my memory and recollection of the day, in addition to the having already painted the subject, and I'm changing it just to convey just that little bit more about the feeling of the subject. Let's have a little bit of raw umber. Just in here. Some burnt sienna. For the roof of this, I think it's the sailing club. Put a bit of ultramarine and burnt umber. To give the side here, just let that all run. The roof run in there. There's a brick wall. Along here, leave a little bit of light on the top, and then just put a little bit of black with this. And just thicker colour there. Burnt umber and cobalt, just to vary it a bit. A little shadow underneath here, and a shadow down the side of that. Let's put in this post here, just with some sort of nondescript colour. Tiny bit of cobalt violet. Just suggestion of a red there. That's has a sort of a boat colour, but that's as much about painting the edge of this the edge of the stern of this boat is about anything else. One or two sort of handrail things, just it's a job to see exactly what they are. So if I can't quite see what they are, I just sort of suggest them. A lot of interesting bits and pieces down here. A little bit of cerulean. And we'll just put in a little bit of detail of clinker on this boat here. Where it's catching the sun. Just a tiny bit on here, but don't want to overdo the detail in the shadows. And perhaps we'll have just a darker strip down the side of this post where it's in the shade. I could even have a rope there. Viridian and raw sienna with a bit of cadmium yellow for the lighter grass here. It's making it even a little bit. It's catching the full sun here. Bit more cadmium yellow, put a little bit of sap green with it as well. One or two just abstracty marks really for the where there's a bit of mud here. Cadmium orange and cadmium yellow. There's a double white line, a double yellow line here. That'll just help. Just a tiny bit of sort of texturing on the gravel here, where it, and also on the asphalt where it hadn't quite dried out from the early morning rain and tide that come up over the road. It's these, what some people regard as detail, but there's sort of variation, help, I think, make the picture look a little bit more lived in and lively rather than tidied up. Bit of cerulean blue in here. Just need to suggest there's other things going on in this boatyard. And cobalt, ultramarine and burnt umber. To suggest the supports that are holding this huge yacht up. Without them it would all fall down. I'll just clear the palette up and then we'll have a look at these background trees where we're going to have to paint them around the masts. And it'll be important to keep going. Now we'll come to these big trees. Plenty of viridian, which is a useful green, combined with lots of yellows, and paint around these masts. Keep changing it. Bit of raw umber now. Let's have a little bit of Windsor blue, cadmium yellow, and burnt sienna. Try and preserve the masts. But also the booms. Put a bit of burnt umber with that Windsor blue. Try and force out the masts first, and then you can go to town on the other areas. A bit of raw umber now. Sorry, raw sienna. Keep it little. Don't want it too dark everywhere. Can lighten it here. Quite dark here, but just sort of a watery green through here where we're, and then a little bit of blue where we're sort of peering through the perspex canopy. And back to the these I've smudged something. I'll have to come back and do that. I need to try and keep the masts as straight as possible because, after all, they are straight. Now we're gradually coming down towards the getting into the distance now. Tiny bit of texturing up there with individual leaves. Dark here. quite dark there to force out the white on the gable end there. There's another little post here, which I put in and narrowly avoided it coming out the top of that chap's head. That's slightly lighter yellow here. And then dark again to set up the distance. Quite dark underneath the bushes. And of course they'll cast shadows across these marshes here as well. Now before that dries out, I just need to indicate some of these, if I can. It's not dried out too much. Some of the rigging, which is sort of light against sky, light against the dark. It's a case of just catching it before it dries out. And there's the pulpit, the guard on that one there. Perhaps on this one too. Too late. Just accept it if you're too late. Just going to build this tree up here a little bit. This sort of blue smudge across here, if I wet it, I should be able to remove it. Oops, water's too dirty. Ought to use clean water for that. I'll come back and deal with that later on. While that's drying, perhaps we'll set about doing the lettering. Lettering's always, you've got to be careful with lettering. I would say to people, don't write it, draw it. And a good way of drawing it, to be much more conscious of drawing it, is actually to do it backwards. That's what I did when I did it outside. I drew the letters individually, draw them rather than write them. And if you do them, if you write the words backwards, if you're as bad at spelling as I am, it forces you to keep looking at what you're not writing but drawing. Now here I've sort of got the pencil, I've already outlined it with pencil, as I did when I did it first time. Again, the trick to doing this is to do it in such a way so that the mark you've left leaves the same, or attracts the same attention as it did when if you were there in reality. So if people start reading the picture, then, and they wouldn't have been reading this. They'd have seen what it was, but that's all. So they should be just as aware of it in your painting as they would have been if they were just walking along. Now that that's dried out, we can quickly put in the figures, and an opportunity to dress them in some sort of colour which is in contrast to the amount of attention you want from them. Let's keep this chap in white, so that side will be in the shade, and then let's give him a blue trouser leg, which was cerulean, and then this one will be cobalt, sorry, ultramarine, slightly darker, just to convey the shaded side. And then I'll just merge his trousers with his top, repaint his left arm, and then before it all dries out, just give him a little bit of a shadow. Let's give this chap a shadow first. He can have darker trousers. And we'll give him a yellow coat. The figures in the back, it's a nondescript blue. Now, if you were walking along here, you wouldn't recognise these people if you saw them again, and therefore you should paint them again with as much, so that they attract as much attention as they do in reality. Just finish off that shadow there, and there's obviously a big shadow from this boat across here. Make it a little bit warmer. Come across here. Just soften that so it's all a bit lost in there. And some other shadows coming across here from other things going on in the boatyard. What will also be nice is a little shadow just underneath the lip of the frame of this notice board, and perhaps as a way of cutting that off, let's invent a diagonal shadow across there, and then carry it on. Oh, Viridian, bit of burnt sienna, carry it on down here. so as to emphasize this, and also a bit of cerulean, alizarin crimson perhaps. There's a different, we can put a shadow underneath here and underneath here, and I'm just going to darken that bit there just to pull out that, and then I'm going to lose it with water. Just want to emphasize that nice shape on the edge there. Now I just put in some colour on some of these masts, a bit of raw sienna for this wooden mast here, and just indicate some of the rigging and the cross trees here. Don't overdo it. Now this is an aluminium mast, so a little bit of a shadow sort of underneath the, just underneath the boom, and then just on the left hand side. Be a better brush to use. Oops. Burnt sienna and a little bit of cobalt. Make it a little bit darker as it goes against the sky. And obviously bits and pieces down here where it attaches to the just have some reflections through there. This mast, you're seeing it through the window of the just enough for the viewer to have a sense that the mast's not going to fall over. And these masts were wooden. So a little bit of dry brush will help indicate a little bit of vigour on the bark. A bit of work on supporting that. Just going to emphasise that there. I'm just going to fill up one or two little white holes where I feel it might be a bit too sparkly. Purpose of that is really just to define the top of this boat here. These are reflections through through that. There's always bits of rope hanging down. Bit of a shadow across him, on him. So a little bit of orange here, a little bit of bright red, just to sort of suck the viewer in, although we've got plenty of colours in the other areas. Cobalt blue, bit of light red with it, and plenty of water, more blue than and there'll be various sort of shadows of the rigging across here, and perhaps even a shadow across there, and lose it. There's a ladder fixed to the stern of this. Don't forget to, it's a bit crude that. Once you start adding things, don't forget the consequences of the shadow and things like that. Always be aware of what impact things that you've made up will have on the rest of the picture. Let's just straighten this. Right, well, I think that's about as far as I feel I can take that, and it has got a nice feeling. I sense of a bright, breezy, lively day, conveyed, I hope, through the strong colours and the brisk, deliberate, positive brush strokes. Well, thanks for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed that, and it's given you some ideas about how to use the information that you've collected by painting on plein air or drawing on plein air to do a painting in the studio, and not some sort of watercolour light sketch. You know, I want a sort of strong painting. Thanks again for watching, and good luck with your painting.